Waiting. Yes, we are live. We are live. All right. A couple of technical difficulties. We are back live here on the Her Hoop Stats Happy Hour live from beautiful Assembly Hall here in Bloomington, Indiana. And of course, we're just kidding. We're at home. We are waiting patiently for the Michigan-Indiana game to start at 6 p.m. We're going to talk some WNBA free agency, talk about all the trades that went down. We're going to talk about Michigan, Indiana, and then we're going to talk about South Carolina and Tennessee. So welcome, hang out, have a glass of wine, do something. I forgot to pour myself some wine before we got on. Calvin, how you doing? First off, let's say a quick thing about the weather in Indiana, because that's what we're talking about before we realized that our stream was not working. Shay's in the background smiling. She's our producer. Something always goes wrong with our little streaming platform, but it's working now. So what's the weather like in Indiana? What's your best guess from the great state of Illinois?
Yeah, I can probably get to Indiana in under 2 hours if I drove straight east. So the weather's probably pretty similar to here, which is freezing and lots of snow. Perfect weather to stay inside and watching basketball.
It's also freezing with freezing rain and ice in Washington, D.C. If you're at home and you're affected by any of the crazy winter weather, we hope you guys are doing all right, and we hope you're hanging in there, and we hope you guys can have some fun with us here with our Zoom backgrounds with Assembly Hall. So, Calvin, we don't have a ton of time. So what we're going to do here today is talk about the trade that went down, the big Natasha Howard trade, while also talking about some ancillary moves that happened after it and breaking it down by each team. And what we're going to have is Shay, our wonderful producer, as I mentioned, having a timer on us to keep us to about like 5 minutes per team. So then we don't go like super crazy, as I want to do as someone who likes to talk about this stuff and writes about it often. So Shay, when you are ready, we're going to start talking about the New York Liberty. So let me know when we're good to go. All right. Timer is going off. So we have 5 minutes to talk about the New York Liberty. I'll quickly tell you what they did. They traded the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft, their second round pick in next year's draft, and the Phoenix 2022 first round pick, which they acquired in a trade that sent Kia Nurse and Megan Walker to Phoenix, along with that 2022 first round pick, and the 6th overall pick in this draft for Natasha Howard. So that was the most confusing way I could have said that. What New York ended up with was Natasha Howard and the 6th overall pick. What they gave up was a 1st overall pick, a Phoenix first round pick, and their 2nd round pick in next year's draft, along with Kia Nurse and Megan Walker. Calvin, what are your thoughts generally just on Natasha Howard coming to New York? How high does that push their ceiling?
Well, I think it's huge. It definitely speeds up their timeline. I think Kevin Pelton put it best in his article when he said, if you could sort of create a player in a lab to fit the 5 in Walt Hopkins' 5-out system, you would probably basically create Natasha Howard. I think she's perfect. Obviously she's talented anywhere she goes, but in terms of what Walt Hopkins is trying to do, both with, like I said, 5-out, a lot of cutting off the ball, a lot of ball screens and pick and roll action with Sabrina Ionescu coming back, who was really used to running that at Oregon, and she's going to have a field day running this with Natasha Howard, though. I think, Natasha Howard, this is, for both sides, just a perfect fit.
Yeah, I really love the fit defensively, especially. I think offensively, we're going to have to see how much Natasha Howard can get back to that 2019 form where she was an MVP candidate. She also won Defensive Player of the Year that year. So obviously her strengths are on the defensive side of the ball. We don't have a timer, so we're just going to go along and everyone's just going to have to deal with it. So have fun. But as I was saying, Natasha Howard really is going to be the linchpin of this defense. And I think that's huge because if you look at what happened in New York last year, where they only won 2 games in the Wubble, a lot of it was because of their bad pick and roll defense. And she's going to clean that right up. I mean, she's one of the best pick and roll defenders in the league. I think she is going to give them a different aspect to their defense, and it's just going to be a phenomenal fit on that end. Offensively, do you think she needs to hit threes at a really high rate for it to work, or can they get away with her being less of a three-point shooter, more of a dive person?
I think she needs to hit at a high rate, but not a high volume. I think, she needs to be capable when she's left open. We need to see that three-point percentage somewhere in the, mid 30s, mid to upper 30s. But she doesn't have to be this type of player who's going to be knocking down 2 or 3 a game. She really that just has to be there if teams are going to completely give it to her. But yeah, I think that the first way you're going to see her involved in the offense is, like we said, as more of a diver off of, the pick and rolls with Sabrina Ionescu. And honestly, we haven't talked about Sammy Whitcomb yet. I think she fits, great as well. She's an excellent.
Oh, that's shooter. The other thing that happened. Excuse me. They traded the rights to Stephanie Talbot to the Seattle Storm, in effect, to not match an offer sheet to Sammy Whitcomb. Sammy Whitcomb is going to be playing their 2-3 probably. But yeah, so you're saying Sammy gives them this aspect of shooting.
Yeah, and also I think she's an underrated defender as well. And I think in terms of what they gave up, this was a great year to trade the number 1 pick, because we look at, there's not necessarily that Sabrina Ionescu or that Asia Wilson, at the top of the draft. And even if there was, with the free year, I know you wrote about it a couple months ago in COVID, I think that we don't necessarily know for sure who's coming out of this draft anyway. So the number 1 pick maybe isn't necessarily as valuable, in 2021 as it would be in some years. They only moved down 5 spots to the middle of that first round. I think the Liberty were big winners here with, all of this, when all the dust settled.
Yeah, and they get, the number 1 pick is still a number 1 pick, but I totally agree with you. Like, I would trade it in. It's going to be interesting, and this is probably a conversation for a different day of whether it makes them title contenders within the next couple years. Like, this core, they're pretty much locked into it. Kia Stokes and Laisha Carrington come off the books next year, so there may be some room to change and add, but this is really who they're rolling with. Sabrina, Benaja Laney, Natasha Howard, Sammy Whitcomb, Jocelyn Willoughby. That's the core of this team going forward. Everything else is going to have to fall into place, and we'll see what happens with Maureen Johannes and a bunch of other players. But New York certainly has a brighter future today, I think, than they did before this trade, and that's what they're looking for. And I think it'll get fans excited there in Barclays Center, assuming that we can all play games in the place. But whatever. We're not going to discuss that right now. So Shay gave me the hook there to talk about something else. So we're going to move on to the Seattle Storm. Who did the most? It is hard to say that another team has done the most here. So let's talk about what they added. What they added is Katie Lou Samuelson, Micaiah Herbert-Harrigan, Dallas's 2022 second-round pick, New York's 2022 second-round pick, and the rights to Stephanie Talbot, who they later signed to, I believe, a training camp contract. I will get that information out to you when Calvin's talking, because then I can just not pay attention. They also, though, as I mentioned, they got the number 1 pick. Number 1 pick was not on the things that they received here. So they actually sent out the number 1 pick for Katie Lou Samuelson and that Dallas second. They also sent out that Phoenix first-round pick that they got in the Natasha Howard trade for Micaiah Herbert-Harrigan, getting more proven prospects for this year when Brianna Stewart, Andrew Lloyd are in their last year of their contract, and we may be heading towards a Sue Bird retirement at some point in the next year or 2. So this is really a move where they're trying to reconcile the fact that they lost Alicia Clark, they lost Natasha Howard, and they're trying to keep Stewie happy so she signs an extension, which would be huge because then they could use the core designation on Jewel Lloyd next year. So Calvin, my question here is, do you think they sacrificed too much to get Katie Lou Samuelson on the team, to get Micaiah Herbert-Harrigan on the team, and do those players have enough potential to make this team very good this year, along with Candice Dupree, who they signed to a contract?
I think yes to both. I thought the number 1 pick, the second trade where they brought in Katie Lou for the number 1 pick, was a little bit of a head scratcher. But I also think Katie Lou, she's entering her 3rd year. We saw what she could do at UConn. She has a high ceiling. I don't know if we've seen the ceiling yet. In terms of what they lost, though, we already talked about Natasha Howard and Sammy Whitcomb, and of course, not part of this big day of trades, but earlier on, they already lost Alicia Clark. That's a ton of shooting and defense, gone from this team. Maybe Katie Lou can replace some of the shooting. She hasn't been nearly as prolific of a shooter as maybe we thought she'd be so far in the WNBA. Kiki Herbert-Harrigan has, although low volume, but she's definitely someone who can stretch the floor as well. But just in terms of defense, you lose Howard, Whitcomb, and Clark among 3-player lineups, according to the WNBA website, for the Seattle Storm. That lineup of those 3 was second in defensive rating only to Howard, Whitcomb, and Lloyd. So both those lineups with Howard and Whitcomb, that's really the anchor of their defense that you're talking about is gone now, with the exception of Breanna Stewart. And so defensively, I think offensively they're going to be fine. They're not necessarily going to be dominant. Defensively is where I'm interested to see where this team goes after really having a historic defensive season in 2020, arguably the best defense ever, certainly top 3 or 5. I'm interested to see where they head in that direction. I definitely think they're going to take a step back.
No, I'm totally agreeing with you. I'm very concerned about the defense, and I wrote about this on when I was doing my tiers column on Wednesday. I think they're going to need to be the best offense in the league. That is possible. Like Sue Bird, Jewel Lloyd, if Sue's back to her form from 2018, if Jewel can really start shooting, as I see Shay's shaking her head. We gotta have to get Shay to talk some more. I don't know if she's shaking her head about that. We haven't talked about Brittany Sykes, so I don't know why she would be shaking her head. But Breanna Stewart, the thing is, right, like we could be all worried about the defense. We could be concerned about the potential. We could be concerned about the valuation because obviously like Katie Lou Samuelson is not a player who would fetch number 1 pick in any draft. I don't care how weak it is. But, you still got Breanna Stewart. And if Breanna Stewart signs an extension, Seattle and stays in Seattle, and Jewel Lloyd stays in Seattle too, this team's going to contend for titles for years to come. That's the bottom line, right? Like if you have Stewie, you will be good enough for the going forward.
That is the thing about basketball as a sport compared to, a lot of other team sports, with the exception of maybe quarterback and football. There aren't really, most other team sports, you don't have that one player can necessarily carry you to the playoffs. And even in football, you saw, not to get too off topic, but Deshaun Watson, sometimes it doesn't even work for the quarterback in football. But, in basketball, when you have that top 3, that MVP candidate who's, the face of the franchise for a decade, that's good enough, especially in a league like the WNBA where you're talking about 2/3 of the teams getting to the playoffs. That's not necessarily, I'm not, necessarily going to look at the Storm as a championship team this year. But like you said, if they have Breanna Stewart on the roster, they're getting into the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, and if you told me like, hey, they won a championship this year, I wouldn't be that surprised. It's just like Breanna Stewart became even better. So that's where you're at with Seattle. You just got to keep those 2. If you keep those 2, you'll be rolling. And it might actually be a good idea. I think I want to say Ben Dole was writing about this. Maybe I'm giving credit to the wrong person, but I think Ben wrote about it. Like it's actually kind of easier to build around 2 Supermax players than 3 or 4. Speaking of trying to build around 3 Supermax players, let's move to the Phoenix Mercury. Okay. Phoenix. What they did, obviously, they said they sent out 2 first-round picks. They got back Kia Nurse and Megan Walker. From an asset valuation standpoint, I'm not sure this is the best idea because this team is going to need young talent going forward. However, Phoenix is all about Diana Taurasi. They're going to give her everything they can give her in order to give her the tools she needs to win a championship in Phoenix in her waning years. Let's be real; these are waning years. Like they're going to do everything they can to get her another title, get Brittany Griner more talent to go chase the title. If you like release yourself from the idea that they need young talent, this is a pretty good trade because Kia Nurse is a damn good player. I know she had a terrible season last year, but she's going to be much better this year, especially when she doesn't have an ankle sprain and when she's not like the only creator in an offense. I think she'll do great. They also brought in Megan Walker. I think Megan Walker has a ton of talent. Really weird year in New York last year. I think she has potential too. So I am a little concerned with them just shipping out first-round picks after year after year after year. This is like the 3rd year that they've done it. And last year they traded the pick that became Jocelyn Willoughby. Actually, no, they drafted Jocelyn Willoughby and then traded her for Shore Walker-Kimbrough, who's not on this team anymore. So I am concerned about the valuation. But, Calvin, my question to you is, does Kia Nurse and Megan Walker push this team just a little bit higher into the title conversation for you?
I'm not ready to go there yet in terms of the title
Okay.
conversation. I think they've improved, but so have a lot of other teams at the top, maybe even more so. I'm not ready to put them in that tier quite yet. I do think, the point that you brought up with Kia Nurse about being the only creator on that offense last year, that's a good one, because I think with both of these players, with Megan Walker as well, that we're going to see improvement this year, because with the defensive attention that Brittany Griner gets, defensive attention that Skylar Diggins-Smith gets and Diana Taurasi gets. These two players both shot below 25% from three last year. That's not happening again this year. Kia Nurse was 35% the year before that. Megan Walker was a 40+% three-point shooter at UConn. These two players are going to be a lot more free and get open looks, and we're going to see a lot more offensive production from both of them. But I'm with you though on the first round picks. I'm not sure if I really like when you have, like you said, Diana Taurasi she might play another 20 years for all we know, but she is 39 or whatever she is. Your other two cornerstones are on the wrong side of 30 as well. Not sure if you just want to be playing so free and loose, if you will, with these first round picks.
Yeah, I agree. They do have they've hit, Brianna Turner is really good. I think Alana Smith's good. And Bria Hartley, they gave her a max contract, and that's a big old contract, but when they were rolling last year, she was playing great. So I can't fault them for that. However, I'm concerned, just how's Turner going to fit next to Griner after her year last year, where she really exploded when Griner left the wobble? How is Bria Hartley going to do in year two off an injury? Can she take another step? Because she's going to need to take another step. She took a step last year, but she's going to need to take another one. Same with Kia Nurse. And then guess what? Let's say Kia Nurse takes that next step and plays great. She's going to get a big old contract offer because she's a restricted free agent. And the Phoenix cannot match. They're almost capped out as is. So I just am a little concerned with this team's ceiling. This is another team, right? If you have Diana Taurasi, if you have Skylar Diggins-Smith, if you have Brittany Griner, you will compete for a title. It may mean you're the 5 seed, but you're in the hunt. So there's that aspect to it. But I am concerned about their future, and I think there could be a cratering out at some point if Diana Taurasi falls off even a smidge, because she was tremendous last year. So that's my big question. It's okay, let's say Diana Taurasi takes a tiny step back because she's 40, right? Diana Taurasi's 40 something. What happens? What happens to this team? Can they survive it?
Yeah, and you brought up their ceiling. I think if it's a tiny step back, they can survive it in terms of being a playoff team. I think these moves raise to their floor a lot, but I'm with you that it's not about the floor. I'm concerned about the ceiling, and I'm not sure, unless Diana Taurasi is every bit of the Diana Taurasi of last year, if they have that championship ceiling.
I agree. All right, let's move on. We're getting the hook from Shay. This is going to be weird because we're putting this out as a podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast, hello, how are you? But Shay is producing this as a television. What is television now? We're wasting time. Moving on to the Dallas Wings. How fast did Greg Bibb accept the offer for the number 1 pick for Katie Lou Samuelson? Did he even hear the rest? He just heard, hey, can we trade you the number 1 pick for Katie? Yes, that is what we're going to do. That 100%. Yes, done. Call in the league right now. That's a tremendous bit of business for Dallas. The issue now is that, and they've had this issue for the last 2 years. They have 12 players on the roster, and they have 5 picks in the first 13 picks of the draft. They have number 1, number 2, number 5, number 7, and the first pick in the second round, which is number 13. There's no possible way they can keep, at this point, if they want to keep the players on their roster, there's no possible way they can keep all of those draft picks. So your options here are you pick all the players and you get them to training camp and you figure out who's going to play, or you use some picks and you try to stash some other picks. I'm sure they have some sort of loose plan here, but I don't know. It just seems like a lot of work now for Vicki Johnson in year 1, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever played fantasy sports. This is what it reminds me of. It's if you ever play fantasy sports in a league with some people who are not that active, a little bit, and so there's there's a few people on free agency who are on the waivers who are really good, and you feel like you need to pick them up. But you already have a full roster of people who you love and you don't want to drop. And you're like, why can I only keep 12? Why I wish I could keep 18 because there's so many people.
Rules.
It's the rules. It's how the league works. This is what it feels like to me, the situation the Wings are in, where they have so many of these young valuable pieces, and they don't necessarily have time to see to just because they can't keep 18 or whatever it is people on their roster. They can't keep all these people for 2 or 3 years and see who pans out and who doesn't, and then keep the ones that do, which would be a great strategy, because if you have 7 first-round picks in 2 years, you're almost guaranteed to hit on at least 2 or 3 of them, even if you have some big swings and misses. But they can't do that. So I mean, like you said, you have to, regardless of how many spots you have, when you get that offer of Katie Lou Jamison for number 1 pick, that's an automatic yes. You don't even think about what am I going to do with this number 1 pick? Am I going to have room to sign this number 1 pick? You say yes, figure out the rest later. The rest we'll let the dominoes fall and take care of themselves. But I am interested to see what moves this team makes in terms of all of these people they're going to have to sign.
Yeah, I mean, I think they can take. I don't know how to pronounce her name. I'm gonna butcher it. Alwak Kuir. Have you heard her name before? I've only read it in print.
I have not heard her name.
I've only seen her in Europe, and I've only seen her in that people speaking different languages, so I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce the name. So I apologize to her. I think she's gonna be a number 1 or number 2 overall pick, though, for sure. She's a stash product. She's gonna be able to stay in Finland and grow I think she's 18, 19. They can just draft her and say hey, cool. And she's probably 20 actually. That's the rule. But they can draft her and say hey, cool, you stay overseas while we figure out our whole thing. Yeah, she'll be 20 in August. They can say, hey, chillin', you stay overseas and we'll wait it out. So I'm guessing she's going to be a number 1 or number 2 overall pick. The question is, who do you bring in, right? I don't know, Charlie Collier would fit nicely at center, but it is going to be very confusing because they have Bella Allery, who they use a number 5 pick on. Isabel Harrison's here. Can they cut Megan Gustafson without the state of Iowa going and burning down the Wings facility? That's the question. Kayla Thornton just signed an extension, though. They committed to Mariah Jefferson. Marina Mayberry had a kind of extension. So it's they may have to use one of these picks to get off Astu Dor or Isabel Harrison, although I kind of like those players. You can use them. Brian Agler didn't use them last year, but I don't know what Vicky Johnson's going to do. So it's a lot of work. It's obviously a great trade, a really great piece of business for Greg. And I think with Enrique, right, we're right back to where we started on all these teams. You got Enrique, you got Satu. It's probably going to work out. You're probably fine. We don't need to criticize it too much because you got 2 really good players to build around. But I'm interested to see what's going to happen. How many European players can you pick in one draft and trade those picks? Okay, let's go to the last team involved in this trade. And don't worry if we're not talking about your team right now. It's just they weren't involved in this trade, and that is what we were talking about. Let's go to Minnesota. Minnesota gave up Kiki Herbert-Harrigan for a future first-round pick. Yeah, they added Phoenix's first-round pick next year. It could be a pretty good pick. That's number 6. That's a solid pick. And because of that, it kind of enabled them to then trade to attach a first-round pick to Odyssey Sims to send her to Indiana, which opened up a protected contract slot, which allowed them to sign Aerial Powers. They also got a second-round pick from Indiana, which I think is a really big deal because Indiana's second-round pick's probably going to be pretty good considering that roster. So they kind of traded down maybe 5 spots, 8 spots maximum in next year's draft, while also getting a first-rounder for Kiki Herbert-Harrigan, who probably wasn't going to play on this team that's trying to win now. Minnesota did a lot. What do you think of this team now that they have everything officially done? And what do you think about just the asset plays in this trade for Herbert-Harrigan and the other trade for Sims?
Yeah, well, I said this in the last podcast or the last show that we did together, that Minnesota's my very early pick to win the championship. I know you put them sort of at the top of your tier 2 in your tier article that just came out. Was that today? Recently, go check it out.
I think it was like on Wednesday, but yeah, go check it out.
Yeah,
great stuff on the Her Hoop Stats newsletter.
Yeah, go read it all. But maybe a little bit of a bold take, but Minnesota certainly believes that they can win a championship, and so they certainly, like you said, with this trade to get the second rounder from the Fever, they certainly believe that they're going to have the number 12 pick in the first round. Who knows what the Fever are going to have, but it's probably going to be somewhere between 13 and 15. You're really not moving down very much, and you're also, of course, saving a little bit of money there if you sign that player, because according to the CBA, the rookie scale contract is going to be slightly cheaper with the second round. It might actually be worth it to save whatever small amount that is. The difference between 11, 12, and whatever 13, 14 is really not going to be very big. I don't actually mind this trade for that reason, even though on the surface it looks like, well, they gave up a first rounder, they gave up a third rounder, they gave up Odyssey Sims. All they brought back was a second rounder. It sort of looks lopsided on paper, but you have to sort of view Aerial Powers as part of the trade too, right? Because this trade was in order to free up, like you said, that sixth protected spot to be able to sign her. I think the jump, to add Aerial Powers to the roster, and also, like we said, that's not really a very big difference for that first and second round pick that they're trading. I think this made a lot of sense, from the Lynx perspective.
I think it was I thought it was an excellent job by Coach Reeve, because she had her back against the wall. Like I wrote about this even before it was happening. Like I knew teams are going to try to extract everything they possibly could from Cheryl Reeve, because they knew she had to do it. She already signed Aerial Powers. She did not have a spot for Aerial Powers, so she needed to make this trade. She had her back against the wall, and she got Indiana to take a decently favorable deal. Minnesota probably left a little unhappy, but in the back of their mind, they're like, yes, like we did it. Like we did a really good job to get off Sims. And not that they don't like Sims. Hell, they could still bring her back since Indiana inexplicably waived her, which is another issue for another podcast / live stream. But they could hypothetically bring back Odyssey Sims. We have not found a rule in the CBA that says I cannot do that. It seems like something that's illegal, but they could do it. So this team, though, is largely intact, and they have a really good chance. I'm with you. Like, I think they could win a championship. I think I'd put them, like I said, I put them behind those three teams in my article. I said that I put them behind Chicago, Washington, and Vegas, assuming all those teams have all their players. I think those three teams are just a little bit better, but Minnesota's damn good, and I'm really excited for particularly Kayla McBride. She is going to look so good in Minnesota's system. Like, it's going to be amazing. And, you could already see how much Reeve and McBride are smiling about the types of cuts that they could do, how they could use her coming off the line, how they could use her with the ball in her hands. So I'm really excited for Kayla McBride. And, guess my question is, like, is Nafisa Collier just like a top 5 player? If she's a top 5 player, they're going to win the championship.
I think she is. I think she's borderline top 5 right now. I also think, I agree with you what you said in your piece in terms of Minnesota maybe being a step behind those first 3 teams you mentioned in terms of talent. I also think Cheryl Reeve can win a championship with a roster that's a step behind the top tier in talent, because she has shown herself to be a talent developer and a coach that can get the most out of the sum of the parts, if you will. So that's why I'm picking the Lynx as my champion this year. But I love what they did this offseason.
Jumping the gun, man. You're making a championship prediction on February 18th.
I know you didn't ask me to. I just had to.
Well, you're making a championship prediction on February 18th. We don't even know when the damn season's starting. That's a bold take. I'm not gonna predict anyone to win a championship. Although I'm sure someone somewhere is mad about the article that I wrote tearing out teams. But that's your problem. That is not my problem. All right, let's talk. Let's move down the ranks to college basketball. This is an area where you have the expertise, and I'm going to let you shine here because, frankly, I haven't, this month has been insane in terms of the WNBA. So that's pretty much what I've been doing, is just watching tape of players and trying to figure out how they're going to fit on teams. So I haven't watched a ton of basketball. So right now I need Calvin, the educator, here on the Her Hoop Stats happy hour to educate me on Indiana and on Michigan. I'm not rooting for Michigan. I don't particularly like Michigan. And I really enjoy a lot of Indiana stuff. But these two teams ranked in the top 15, they are currently second and third in the Big Ten standings. Michigan is behind Maryland, and Indiana is at 11-2, whereas Michigan's at 7-1. Michigan obviously had that big COVID layoff for 2 weeks. Seems like issues got resolved, which cool. So this game is kind of going to determine who gets a shot at winning the regular season championship if Maryland falters, right? So give me the big picture on, let's start with Indiana. What makes Indiana go?
Well, so Indiana, what I love about Indiana is that they basically have, you could sort of say, 3 point guards in their starting lineup. It starts with Grace Berger, who's one of 8 players in the country, averaging 15 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. She has 2 triple-doubles. I think, I might be wrong about this, they're the only 2 this season, in college basketball. And then you have Allie Patberg, who's taken a step back actually from last year, but Grace Berger has sort of replaced some of that production. This is Allie Patberg's first year after, the last 2 seasons she shot 38, 39% from 3. This year that's dipped below 30%. So I'm interested to see how Allie Patberg steps up tonight and if she's able to knock down her perimeter shots. But you have both of those players who last year Patberg averaged 5 assists, Berger averaged 3. This year that's flipped. Berger's averaging 5, Patberg's averaged 3. You also throw in Nicole Cardano-Hillary, who has stepped into the starting lineup, as their 5th starter now, transfer from George Mason after Jalen Penn, had that ankle injury and opted out. She played point guard for 3 years at George Mason, and now she's, basically the 5th starter on this team. You really have 3 capable ball handlers, capable shooters, and it's a perfect storm for Mckenzie Holmes in the middle to just be able to eat and go to work. So I love watching this team and how these players how those perimeter players sort of play off each other. They're all able to find each other, and how Mckenzie Holmes just absolutely dominates the paint on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this team's stat profile and the games you've watched them, like, they're just a dominant defense. They are 7th in the nation in the Her Hoop Stats defensive rating at 76.2 points per 100 possessions. Offensively, 107.6 points per 100 possessions, which is 29th among 343 teams in the country. That is damn good in a conference that is one of the best in the nation. And then when we flip it over to Michigan, I can tell you what makes this team go. I know enough to know this. It's Nas Hillman. She is just a dominant inside force. 26 points per game. Her 11.7 rebounds per game, 0.7 blocks, like a beast in every regard. Obviously, we all know that she had a 50-point game against Ohio State right before the team had to go on that COVID break. And I'm interested in getting your perspective on this. Like, I don't know how to think. And I think Nas Hillman is a junior, right?
She is.
Yeah, Nas Hillman's a junior. So I'm just like, as a WNBA person, I'm not sure how to think about her in terms of what she can do at the next level. Not that it matters for this game, obviously, but I'm interested in getting your perspective as to what you think she could profile as in the pros.
Yeah, well, she's not a shooter, really. She hasn't taken any threes. She doesn't stretch the floor. She doesn't need to at this level because she's so dominant in the paint. Like you said, she's shooting 79% at the rim, and that's on high volume. Like you said, 26, 3rd in the nation in points per game of 26. I think at the next level, maybe the hope is that she can step out. She's shooting 75% from the free throw line. So unlike a lot of these bigs that you see who don't shoot threes, who own the paint, she's not a liability there. She has that capability to knock down free throws, which I think is a good sign in terms of her maybe stepping out, and expanding her range a little bit at the next level, especially since she's going to get, we believe at least 1 more year. I don't know when her birthday is, whether she's eligible for the draft, but it probably doesn't matter. We think she's coming back anyway. At least 1 more year in college to sort of hone that part of her game. I think she's going to be a good player in the WNBA because I think in addition to all those things you said, only player in the top 10 in points and rebounds in the country. Like we said, she owns the paint and is as efficient as anyone. She's also really underrated as a passer. which is crucial when you're that good in the paint, because you're going to face double team after double team. And Michigan has shooters around her. Leah Brown is shooting 46% from three. You have to be able to find those players. And Michigan's really good at cutting off the ball too. So they sort of, help her. It's a chicken or the egg thing. Is she a good passer because they cut off the ball, or vice versa? I don't know. But I think that's going to be, another skill that's really going to translate and, thrive at the WNBA level.
Did you bring up her offensive rebounding percentage? Because that 18.7, that's absolutely absurd. that's crazy.
It's unbelievable. It's what she's able to do really on both sides of the ball in terms of rebounding is just unreal. I was just going back and watching the film earlier of their game a couple days ago against Michigan State, and I mean, she had, I think, 5 offensive rebounds in the first half. I might have that number wrong. Every from the jump, Michigan State was sending 2 bodies sometimes at her to box her out. It didn't matter. She's relentless. And it's a huge part of Michigan's offense, is in addition to, all her paint touches that she gets, is getting the ball on the rim and letting her go get it.
Yeah. And this game's coming up in about 20 minutes, 6 p.m. on Big Ten Network. Our colleague, Christy Winter-Scott, on the call, actually. So go watch that game. I love watching games with Christy because I get to talk to her every week about it later. Also, shouts to Christy because her South Lake Seahawks lost in the regional final, which that's a significant bummer because they had a pretty Cinderella season. Her daughter's high school team, who she is the coach of, and Bree Scott heading to Georgetown, who almost won today and did not because they're having a rough season. Regardless, let's talk more about this game. Give me a matchup what's a key matchup in this game? Is it going to be whoever's guarding that? Like, do you even try to stop Nas Hillman? Because Ohio State kind of just let her eat and won the game anyways. What would be your key matchup in this game?
Yeah, well, I love Leah Brown, and I think she's maybe the most underrated player in the country. She's averaging 20 points a game and is really the Robin to Nas Hillman's Batman. But I do think the matchup to watch has to be Nas Hillman versus Mckenzie Holmes. We talked about, how dominant they both are. Nas Hillman is definitely a little bit more so on the offensive end. Mckenzie Holmes, though, is just one of the best maybe the best rim protector, certainly one of them in the Big Ten, averaging almost 3 blocks per game. Here's what I'm concerned about for Indiana, though, in terms of this matchup. When Holmes sits, shout out to CWWB Analytics, by the way, for the on-off data, which, with all the usual caveats of on-off data, I still think this is important. When Holmes sits, Indiana allows opponents to shoot 72% at the rim, which is a full over 10 percentage points different, 10 percentage points worse than when Holmes is on the court. And obviously that's huge when you're going up against a player like Nas Hillman. Here, one thing, though, that Mckenzie Holmes has done much better at this year than, last year for this Indiana team is staying out of foul trouble to be able to be on the court, because they struggle to guard the rim when she is not on the court. That's really important. Last year, she averaged 19 minutes per game. This year, she's up at almost 30 and still averaging fewer fouls per game than she did last year.
Wow.
So that's going to be a key, is can she stay on the court? Obviously, she's gotten, much better at that, but at the same time, she hasn't gone up against someone like Nas Hillman yet, who can just, wreak havoc and is one of the best players in the country at drawing fouls. If Mckenzie Holmes gets into foul trouble early, this might be a long night for Indiana in terms of guarding the rim and trying to stop Nas Hillman. But if she can stay on the court, I think she is one of the most well-equipped players to match up one-on-one with Nas Hillman. Not sure if anyone can fully stop her one-on-one. We're going to have to send doubles, here and there, but Mckenzie Holmes is about as close as you can get.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think it's just hard to stay out of foul trouble, period, when you're playing a player that good. It's almost a mental thing. Like, you're just like, I have to foul her to stop her. Okay, let's make a prediction. Although we have a few more minutes. But yeah, let's make a prediction. I like doing this. I like putting people on the spot. I'll make one first, since mine is like mostly uninformed, because I haven't seen Michigan play, honestly, since they came back from break. I haven't seen Indiana play in a couple weeks, so don't know where either of these teams super are, but I'm going to make a prediction anyways, because that's what we do on podcasts. I'm going Indiana at home in Assembly Hall. taking the one from Michigan, and then I believe that may actually end up giving Maryland the Big Ten title. Who you got?
I'm actually going to go with Michigan. I think Michigan has a little bit of chip on their shoulder after not being part of that top 16 seed reveal over the weekend. They're in the top 16 in the net. They're in the top 16 in the AP poll. They have been for a long time. But really the layoff and the lack of games, I think, is what the committee was looking at, not putting them as a top 4 seed. I think they have a chip on their shoulder. This is going to be, whoever wins this game, this is going to be the biggest win for either of them on the season. It's interesting looking at these two teams' resumes. Both of them have exactly one win over a team that's currently ranked, and that is number 24 Northwestern, who just lost last night. Is probably about to drop out of the rankings. So it could be that when Monday's rankings come out, the only currently ranked team that either of these teams has beaten is each other, whichever one wins today. So it's a massive game, like you said. If Maryland can get picked off, down the stretch, it's a massive game. Maybe even has title implications. I'm going to go with Michigan.
All right. By the way, elsewhere in the Big Ten, Ohio State beat Purdue at a game that was played at 4 p.m. for God knows what reason. I don't know why the Big Ten is doing this to us. Like, why are you putting ranked games in the middle of the day? They won 100-85. Iowa beats Penn State. I knew you were worried about that before we got on. They beat them 96-78.
Yeah, Iowa outscored Penn State 27-11 in the fourth quarter of that game. They were losing for about 3 quarters, and then as soon as we went live, they turned it around and saved themselves from a really embarrassing and damaging resume loss.
You're welcome, Iowa. You are welcome, as always. And then just to look ahead a little bit to Maryland, assuming all these games get played, disclaimer. They have Minnesota at Purdue and at Northwestern at 11-1. If Indiana wins tonight, I don't think they can get caught because they'll have a tiebreaker over Indiana, assuming they only lose one of those games, which I think is a pretty good assumption considering how damn good Maryland has been this season. But that's for the regular season title. Obviously, the conference tournament will determine a lot more. Quick question before we move on to South Carolina, Tennessee. Which conference is better, the Big Ten or the SEC?
I'm going to go with the SEC. I think the SEC is deeper. I think they had, I believe it was 5 teams in that top 16 seed reveal, and they have another probably 3 or so tournament teams. You could talk about maybe Alabama being in the bubble. Of course, Ohio State not eligible for the tournament this year. So when you look at Big Ten's tournament teams, you have to sort of add one mentally. But I just, the SEC is such a grind night in and night out. And you see teams like even Texas A&M, their one loss was to LSU, who's not, maybe on the wrong side of the bubble, but probably not a tournament team. You have Ole Miss, not a tournament team, but one of the most improved teams in the country and giving people fits. I mean, it seems like every Thursday night, I feel like or every Sunday, when most of these games are played, I look at the SEC and see some ranked team losing late, if not losing the game, to an unranked team. With the exception of South Carolina, who doesn't lose to anyone. SEC is just loaded from, in terms of these teams in the middle who can pick off anyone at the top at any given night. South
Carolina only loses gross games. There's an argument that South Carolina kind of usually plays gross games, but they've only lost the only games they've lost are gross games to very good teams. So you gotta tip your hats to them, and they haven't. I don't think they haven't lost at home, right? The NC State game was away as well, or in a neutral site.
NC State was at South Carolina actually.
Oh, okay. So they have lost at home. Not that home court matters. Yeah. I do hope Alabama makes it because I want to see Jasmine Walker in the tournament, but that's not who we're talking about today. We're not going to. We're going to give the teams that are playing their shine. South Carolina, Tennessee. South Carolina's, like you mentioned, 12-0 in conference. Tennessee is 6-3 in the conference. At some point, if someone else is going to get close to winning this conference, South Carolina has to go down. Could it be tonight? Ryan Davis coming in for Tennessee, one of the best draft prospects in this class, going up against you know the list of players from South Carolina. I don't think I need to tell you all of them, but Aaliyah Boston leads the group, and this I'm not sure it's going to go well for Tennessee. But what do you think?
Yeah, well, it's a huge game in the standings both ways. Not that Tennessee is going to be able to catch South Carolina, but assuming, and again, disclaimer, that everyone comes to the SEC tournament, that they have an SEC tournament, and everyone who has not opted out, which is everyone except Vanderbilt, is there. You're under the normal format. You're talking about the top 4 getting that double bye. Right now, Tennessee is at 6-3. You have Kentucky and Georgia at 8-4 with the same winning percentage. More games won, more games lost, sort of breathing down their neck. Those 3 teams are really fighting it out for spots 3 and spots 4. For Tennessee to come away with an upset tonight would be huge for them to get one of those double bye spots, the top 4 in the SEC. On the flip side, for South Carolina, the only team that can catch them is Texas A&M, who's one loss right now. South Carolina obviously undefeated. They play each other if it doesn't get canceled for the only time this season on the last day of the regular season, which if they both win out until then will be for the SEC regular season title, because if Texas A&M wins, they'll both have one loss. They'll have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So this is a really big game for South Carolina too, to be able to make sure that they stay ahead of Texas A&M, or at least even with them. And that game is for the title. If they get picked off, South Carolina has a pretty tough schedule coming up. They go to Kentucky. They play at home against Kentucky in their next game. Kentucky game Fitz, was up for most of the game, ended up losing by 5 the last time around. So this, if they do get picked off tonight, it could turn into a 2-game losing streak. Yeah. You never know. Ryan Howard could go off on them. And all of a sudden Texas A&M could be in the driver's seat. So it's a huge game, in the standings both ways. I got South Carolina though. I just think they're a more talented team. That was my long-winded way of leading up to my prediction that I am going to go with South Carolina. I'm not going to get that bold. I hope it's a close game. I don't know if it will be. South Carolina is just too talented. I think if Tennessee is going to win this game, though, what they're going to have to do is take advantage of their length in the backcourt. Both of these teams are really big in the front court and own the paint. There's 2 teams in the country who rebound over 40% of their own misses and over 70% of opponents' misses, and also block over 13% of their opponents' shots. That's South Carolina and Tennessee. So in terms of offensive, defensive rebounding, and blocks, these 2 teams are the class of the country. Like you said, Renaya Davis, Aaliyah Boston. There's just so many big people on both these teams. But here's where I think Tennessee wins it, if they do win it, is that Tennessee also has that size in the backcourt, which South Carolina can't match up with. Destiny Henderson, 5'7", Zia Cook, 5'9". They are more talented and they are quicker, but they are not bigger than Tennessee's backcourt, who is 6'1", 6'2", 6'2". We talked about how much Nas Hillman dominates the paint. She's 6'2". Tennessee's whole starting lineup basically is 6'2 plus, except for their shooting guard, who's 6'1" in Ray Burrell. So if you can, get some of those players like Henderson and Zia Cook caught up, in a matchup in the post, force them to guard, Tennessee's 1s, 2s, and 3s in the post, and also just take advantage of that length to get deflections, to help and just frustrate. It's always when you're a little guard. When I was playing basketball, I was a little guard, so I hated when someone really long and lanky and big was on me. And that's what Tennessee does to you, So if Tennessee's going to win the game, it's going to be by taking advantage of their length in the backcourt. Excellent
analysis and graphics that Shay was putting up there. That was really fun. I was just watching it on my phone, so that was a lot of fun for me personally. I think South Carolina's going to win. I don't need all the fancy numbers or whatever. South Carolina's just a better team. I believe in the length in the backcourt. They make a good point. I just think Destiny Henderson, Zia Cook, those players can get to the rim. And what happened against UConn and what hasn't happened other times this season is they literally could not make anything. Not that this team shoots great, right? This is not a tremendous shooting team from the field, but they're better than what they put on tape against UConn because there was just a lid on that basket. I think this team is amazing. I just think this defensively, they're 3rd in the nation on her hoop stats defensive rating. It's tough to score. It's tough to score because they have Aaliyah Boston to start off with, and then you have a bunch of willing, tough defenders, including Victoria Saxon, who I think is one of the tougher players in the nation. So I'm excited to see where this team goes. I think they're going to win tonight. I think the bigger question is when they play Texas A&M, do they put it down on Texas A&M? Because they play good team, like you mentioned, this was one of the best conferences in the country. They put it down on good teams. But I want to see them do it again now that they've, kind of got dinged against UConn, just to see how they can play against a really, really good team in Texas A&M and come out and win the conference, put their stamp on this season like they did last year before COVID hit and we lost the remaining season, right? Like they were on this massive winning streak. So I want to see them do it again soon. Starts tonight against Tennessee, like you mentioned. Then they're going to go off and play Kentucky, Florida, Texas A&M. I want to see them put it down on all three of those teams because they should be better than all three of those teams, frankly. Just like flat out, you need to be putting it down on those teams because you're better. Now, my question, though, we have like 2 minutes left. I want to get off so people can get to their TVs. But is South Carolina the best team in the country, in your estimation, good sir?
They're one of them. I'm going to go with Stanford as the best team in the country. They're already, right up there in whatever metric or ranking you want to look at. And I think people don't talk enough about how Stanford has done that basically on the road all year. They went from like November 20-something, I don't have the dates in front of me, to February 6th or something like that. With the whole month of December or January without playing a home game. And in addition, Michelle Smith, Pac-12 writer, brought up a great point the other day that Cal, Stanford's travel partner in the Pac-12, has had a really long COVID pause. And therefore, wherever Stanford goes, wherever they're playing, only has to prepare for them. While they're having to prepare for two opponents. They go to Arizona, they have to prepare for Arizona and Arizona State. Both those teams are only spending the whole week preparing for them. And despite all that, they've still put together one of the best resumes and, one of the most impressive performances in the country. So I'm going to go with Stanford as number one. I certainly think South Carolina is in the top three and could definitely win a championship. Especially if their transition game is working and if their shots are falling. You mentioned, their shooting. If you go through their game log, it's their 3-point percent, 50%, 50%, 10%, 10%, 50%, 10%. It's so inconsistent. When their shots are falling, no one's beating them. And when they're getting out in transition, like we said, Destiny Henderson, Zaya Cook, even if they're a little bit too small to maybe match up with some of those Tennessee guards in the backcourt, they're going to beat them all down the floor. So it's not going to matter. And they're going to beat them off the dribble. So it's not going to matter. Their transition game, that's also what lost them the game at UConn, I think, is their shots not falling. And UConn really, really did a good job of getting back and slowing them down in transition. I don't think Tennessee is going to be able to handle that. I don't think most teams can. So if South Carolina can get out in transition, and connect on their shots, I think they're right there with anyone in the country.
Yeah, I think South Carolina's the best team in the country. Just they have too much talent. I've said it before. Stanford's excellent, and we'll give UConn credit. I don't know why I don't believe in UConn this year. They just have too many freshmen. Like I just keep and Paige is incredible, and Kristen Williams is incredible. I love Olivia Nelson-Ododa. I just don't know why I can't believe in this team. I can't believe in UConn as the national championship favorite. I still think it's South Carolina or Stanford. Or you know what? You could convince me on NC State because I think NC State might have the highest ceiling in the country, but they also have a pretty low floor, especially for these good teams that we're talking about in the top 10. And if Angel Reese was healthy, I'd say Maryland's up there too, but she's not. So if she comes back, I'm not sure where we are with her injury. She comes back, she's the next.
Yeah, the last thing that I've heard, which may not be up to date, is that she has a chance at coming back in early March. I certainly hope that happens because I agree with you. I think she had a phenomenal start to her freshman year, in November, and if she comes back, this team's ceiling is a national championship.
Yeah, I just don't know how is she going to come back? She's a freshman. So we'll have to see. We have plenty of time to talk about that on these Her Hoop Stats happy hours. We're going to try to do one every week. Next week, I'm not going to be here. Megan Gower is on the last one. Megan Gower is very good at this. So you will be in very good hands, regardless if I'm here or not. Thank you to Shay Jennings, who was clicking the clacks, ticking the talks. Oh, not tick. No, she wasn't TikToking. I don't know. Actually, were you TikToking? No, she was not. She was not on TikTok while producing this. And Calvin, thank you to you for providing our college basketball insights and going with me on the WNBA journey and providing your insights there. This was a lot of fun. If you are hanging out with us on the live stream, thanks for joining us on Twitter and YouTube. If you're listening to this on the podcast, please laugh at our takes about these games that you've already watched from last night. We will talk to you guys very soon, and have a great day. Stay safe out there with the snow and all that too, because that's scary stuff. So